Yes, here's one. Welcome. All right, guys, quickly check. I'm not sure if you managed to copy down question 4, like the actual wording of the question. So it said at the top, calculate, and then for number 4, we are calculating the total amount paid for the cell phone. I'm just going to run through everything that we've already calculated again, because obviously we did this example ages ago. Last week, Thursday, I think, we did this example, so you might have forgotten what's happening here. Okay, guys, just a reminder, this example was all about hire purchase, right? So it was a cell phone. I'm going to go back up to the top quickly just to remind you what's happening here. It was a cell phone that costs 18,000 Rand cash. So if you go into the shop and you just buy it, then you would have to pay 18,000 Rand. But you cannot afford the cash price, so they offered you a hire purchase agreement. Remember, if we see hire purchase, we always think simple interest. Okay, very important. So you needed to pay a 10% deposit up front, and then after you've paid your deposit, the amount that you still owe that shop, you have to pay interest of 12% per annum on that, right, for 2 years. And every month you are going to be paying back the same amount, so an equal monthly installment. So just to remind you of the things that we've already calculated here, we found that the deposit was 1,800 Rand, right? 10% of the cash price. So 10 over 100 times the cash price that they gave us. So that was 1,800. The loan amount, remember, is always your cash price minus the deposit. If there is a deposit. Guys, if the question doesn't say anything about a deposit, then the loan amount is just the cash price, right? So if they just said this cell phone is 18,000 Rand and you must pay it off in equal installments, and they didn't say anything about a deposit, then there is no deposit. Okay, then you are just going to pay interest on the 18,000 Rand as it is. So some questions have a deposit, other questions might not. Okay, so if they don't say anything about it, then there isn't a deposit. This I'm just going to highlight actually, and I just want to add that as a note there. So this P, the loan amount, cash price minus deposit, I'm just going to add if the question states that there is one. Okay, please just add that, because sometimes there won't be a deposit. I'm also just going to add here, if no deposit, P equals cash price. So if there's no deposit, then you obviously owe the shop the full cash price. So that is then your original amount. That is the amount that you owe them. So just add that there as well. Okay, so after we calculated the loan amount, so the amount that we now owe the shop, they asked us to find the value of the monthly installments, and there were 2 steps to this calculation. You need to memorize these steps, guys. Firstly, you are going to calculate A, and you are going to calculate A using the simple interest formula. Remember, hire purchase is always simple interest. Okay, so that's always going to be your first step. When they're asking you to find the value of the monthly installments, you're going to calculate A. And then once you have your A value, you are going to divide that by the number of months. So that's step 2. Now again, the number of months, it depends on what they told you in the question. Right? For this question, it was 2 years. If it was 3 years, you would have 36 months. If it was 4 years, you would have 48 months. Okay, so the number of months depends on what they tell you in the question. Okay, now guys, number 4, the total amount paid for the cell phone. Right, now for this, we are again going to write a formula down. So total amount this is always going to be your A value. Because yes, guys, the cell phone was worth 18,000 Rand, but because we didn't pay it immediately, they added interest to it. Does that make sense? Right? They're not going to make you still pay 18,000 Rand only if you're paying it over 2 years. They charged us interest on that amount. So the total amount is going to be A because that includes the interest. And then we also paid a deposit at the beginning of this 2-year period. Right? That 1,800 Rand that we paid, we also paid that towards the cell phone. Right? So if they're asking for how much did you actually pay for this phone, not 18,000, we paid much more. We paid the A value because that includes interest, and we paid that deposit. Okay, so please highlight that as well. That is a formula that you must memorize. The total amount paid is the A value plus your deposit. Now, what was the A value for this question? We calculated it in the previous question. 20,088 Rand. Right, so that is the loan amount plus the interest that they are charging us because they're giving us more time to pay this phone off, plus a deposit of 1,800 Rand. Okay, what's that? Here we go, 21,888 Rand. So guys, because we didn't pay for it immediately, we paid almost 22,000 Rand for the cell phone that was actually worth 18,000 Rand. And if you do this calculation with like a cell phone contract, right? If any of you have a cell phone contract that maybe you pay for, I don't know, or your parents, and you actually take the amount that they pay every month and you multiply it by, nowadays contracts are 36 months, it's no longer only 24 months, it's much more than what it would have been if you had the money to just buy the phone in the beginning. Okay, but most people don't just have 18,000 Rand lying around, so they have to buy a phone on contract. Okay, and then you lose out with the interest, unfortunately. All right, guys, so these are kind of the basic calculations that you need to be able to do when you are given a hire purchase question. All right, you need to be able to find the deposit by taking the percentage that they give you and multiplying it by the cash price. You need to be able to find the loan amount. You need to be able to find the value of the monthly installments, and then they can also ask you to find the total amount paid for the cell phone. Okay, please take out I think most of you probably stuck this page in. It's grade 9 finance, sorry, disconnected you now. It says grade 9 finance hire purchase worksheet. Just quickly look at that. It's 1/2 of the worksheet that I gave you guys last week. So we've already done some of the questions of the one side. It was simple and compound interest. And then the other side is hire purchase. I have 2 extras here if any of you were maybe absent and you didn't get. Can't remember. All right, on this worksheet, let me quickly see if I have it here. Yes. Okay, so I would like you now to do the first question. Now I'm just going to go through the questions that they're asking you, because in number 1, they're asking the questions in a different order. But you are still going to have to calculate all the same things. All right, so let's quickly read through this. They're saying a leather armchair has a cash price of 5,000 Rand. If bought on hire purchase, what do we think if we see hire purchase? We think simple interest. Okay, so guys, you can actually write next to the heading of this worksheet, we are going to use this formula for all of the interest calculations here. Right? We are not going to use the compound interest formula at all. Hire purchase is always simple interest. So they're saying a 10% deposit must be paid. All right, so we do have a deposit in this question. It's 10%. And the balance, now the balance means the 5,000 minus the deposit. Okay? Then paid over 24 months at an interest rate of 18% per, I see there's a typo there, per annum. All right, it's 2 M's there instead of 2 N's. Sorry about that. So that is the interest rate that we are going to use in our formula, 18%. That's a very high interest rate. Okay. 1.1, what is the total amount paid for the armchair over the 24-month period? Guys, please look at the example that we did just now. What was the formula that we wrote down for total amount paid? Total amount paid was?
A plus deposit.
A plus deposit. So that is what we are going to have to use to answer this question. So for question 1 is the same as our last question in the previous one. Now guys, how do you find A? By using your simple interest formula. What do we sub into that formula? We sub in a P value, an I value, and an N value. The I value is going to be 18%. Are we happy with that? That's the interest rate for that they are charging us, right? What is N? How many years? 24 months is 2 years. Okay, so for this one, N is going to be 2. What about P? What is the P value? You can look back at the previous example that we did, and you can see there, how did we calculate that P value in the previous example? Over here, we wrote down a formula for it. P is the cash price minus deposit. To see how important it is that you guys memorize these formulas that I've highlighted. Right? So I think I said last week already, finance is an easy section. You can easily get full marks for it, but you're going to have to put in the time to actually memorize these steps and these formulas. Okay, and if you don't, you're not going to get the marks. So we also need to calculate this. What is the cash price of this armchair? 5,000 Rand. Yes? First, we need to find the deposit. Okay, so I'm going to do that very first calculation just with you guys. So the deposit for this one, what percentage is the deposit of this one? 10%, right? They said a 10% deposit must be paid. So 10% times the cash price, which is 5,000. So this deposit is 500 Rand. Guys, if that's the only thing that you can do, you will get a mark for that at least. Okay, so remember I said last week, if you can only find the deposit, then at least find the deposit. Don't just leave it out because you now don't know how to get the total amount paid. All right, if you see the question says there's a 10% deposit, work that out in your first question. Okay, you will get a mark for that. Now, what did we say? P is cash price minus deposit. I'm going to have to just abbreviate it there. I don't have enough space. What was the cash price of this armchair? 5,000 minus the deposit of 500. I'm left with 4,500 Rand. This is now the P value that you are going to put into your simple interest formula. Okay, so once you have your P value, your next step is going to be A equals, write down that simple interest formula. Again, you get a mark for it. because you know the formula and you know that that's the one you must use for hire purchase. I'm running out of space here now. I'm just going to move it to this little gap here. Now we're going to say, what is the p-value? 4,500 bracket 1 plus the interest rate that the shop is charging us is 18% for 2 years. Guys, please note they said 24 months, hey? So if you put 24 in your calculation, that's going to be 24 years. Okay, so be very careful. Remember, n is always the number of years. So it's times 2. Let me quickly see what this is equal to. Okay, I am getting 6,120 Rand. Remember, what did they ask in this question? What is the total amount paid? And we know, because we memorized that formula, yes, that is A plus the deposit. Guys, here is A, and here is my deposit. Okay, so once you've calculated A and you've calculated your deposit, you can then say, therefore, total amount equals 6,120 plus 500, so 6,620 Rand. That's a lot of working for one question. Okay. So guys, please, you are going to have to take some time to actually memorize all of these formulas, because if you know total amount paid is A plus deposit, and you then know how must I find A, you first need to find P, and for that you first need to find the deposit, right? Then you should be able to, if you can't get full marks for this, at least get some marks. Okay. Now for 1.2, they've asked how much of this was interest. Now guys, go back to when we first started this section, please. When we first started finance, go back. Somewhere we wrote a formula for interest amount. Interest amount paid. I'm going to look in my notes as well for where we wrote that down. Somewhere we wrote a formula for how much interest. I can see it here in my page. How much interest does Janine pay? This was the first day of term 3. It was under compound interest. We made a note here. I'll come back to this page just now. But this is the note that I'm looking at, where I showed you the compound interest formula. And then the second question there was, how much interest does Janine pay? This is the formula for the interest amount paid. Do you remember this? A minus P. We've worked with this a couple of times. So interest is always your final amount, your A value, minus your original amount, your P value. Check please under compound interest, the heading. Did you write this down? If you didn't, please copy it down. There we go. If you didn't, please copy that down now. Under compound interest, we are going to write it now again with this example that we're looking at. But please make sure that all of you have this. It's very important. Okay, interest equals A minus P. There's the formula. Write it down, please. 1.2 of the hire purchase worksheet. Interest equals A minus P. Now, guys, even if in 1.1 your A value was wrong and your P value was wrong, right? But you now are taking in 1.2 your wrong A value minus your wrong P value. You will still get marks for this. Okay, because what am I testing in 1.2? I'm testing whether you know this formula, A minus P. Okay, so if you couldn't get the correct answers in 1.1, you can still potentially get this mark here. Okay, what was the A value? We worked it out. 6,120 minus the P value was 4,500. Let me just move this over a little bit. Let me do that. Okay, what's that answer? What's 6,000 minus 4,500? Can you do that in your heads? 6,000 minus 4,500 is 1,500, right? And now you add 120 to it, yes?
Could you maybe go back one slide?
Okay, I'll go there now, yeah? What's this answer, guys? I lost my train of thought now. 1,620 Rand. Okay, so that is the answer for the interest. That is the amount of interest that this person would have to pay for this armchair. Guys, that's a lot, hey? Because the cash price of this chair was only 5,000. And the interest is, yeah, like almost a half of the actual cash price. That's a lot. Okay, Holly, I'll go back just now. I just quickly want to do 1.3 with you guys. Okay. In 1.3, they now asked for the monthly installment. Now, hopefully, in the previous note, you wrote down how to find the monthly installment. How do we get that? Sorry, that's the wrong one. Here. Monthly installment. Remember, in this question, we didn't have A yet. In the example that I did with you guys starting last week, right? But now we've actually already calculated A. Do you agree? What is A in our question that we just did? 6,120. So for the monthly installment, guys, you always have to divide A by the number of months. If you didn't have A yet, you would have to calculate it here. We already have A. Okay, so we are not going to have to calculate it again. We are just going to say here, installment equals, what is my A value? 6,120 divided by how many months? 24, right? They told us that. Let's quickly see what this is. 255 Rand. Okay, so I just wanted to do this first question with you guys because it was in a very different order from the example that we did. But guys, we haven't actually calculated anything new here, right? Everything in this question, even though the questions were given in a different order, we used those kind of formulas that we wrote down. Okay, so now I want you guys to do the rest of this worksheet. I am just seeing now that 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4 are the exact same questions. So, do you see? Number 3 again is the leather armchair. Sorry, I don't know how that happened. So, all you guys are going to do for me now is number 2. Okay. In number 2, they're saying, Sizwe wants to buy an electric stove. He finds one for 12,000 Rand, but the store offers him the option of 2 hire purchase deals. There's an option A, which is a deposit of 20% of the cash price with the balance to be paid back over 36 months at 20% per annum. And then option B is a deposit of 2,000 Rand. So that deposit is not a percentage, right? They're actually telling you what the deposit is in option B over here. So you're not going to calculate it, it's given. With the balance to be paid back over 30 months at 22% per annum. Now guys, let's quickly talk about this 30 months here. How many years is this? Okay, did you say? 36 months is 3 years, right? So this one is 3 years. So for this calculation, N is going to be 3. For this one, N is going to be 2.5. Okay, 30 months is 2.5 years. Okay, so when you're doing your A calculation using the simple interest formula, N is going to have to be 2.5. Okay, just be aware of that. For 2.1, calculate the total amount paid for the stove. That's the same as 1.1, right? Calculate the total amount paid. Oh, why is it not working now? Okay, there we go. What is the total amount paid for the armchair? That's what they asked in 1.1, right? In 2.1, they're now asking for the same thing. Total amount paid for the stove and the monthly installment. Okay, so you have to do both of those calculations. So you are going to do this. That is the monthly installment calculation, and they want you to find the total amount paid. Which, remember, you have to do kind of a whole bunch of steps in order to get there. Okay, they want you to do those calculations for option A and option B, right? So you're going to have to look at the difference between the two options. And then 2.2, just a little kind of application question. If you were Sizwe, which option would you choose and why? Now, it might be something like, okay, on option A, the monthly installments are smaller, so it's more affordable on a month-to-month basis, so you would choose option A. Or maybe you would say you would choose option B because the total amount paid is less. Okay, so there could be different answers for 2.2. All right, there's not going to be one correct answer for 2.2. For 2.1, you need to do those calculations. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys the rest of the lesson now. It's half an hour to do these calculations. Please take your time. Please don't give up. I've given you an example here of what you need to do when you are finding the total amount paid, right? It's all of these calculations all together. Okay, and then you must also do the installment as well. So you're basically doing the same calculations there, but now with question 2's values. Okay, get going, guys.